Protesters across Egypt are intensifying their campaign against Hosni Mubarak, even after he named a new government and a vice president. His disappointment and the appearance of other new cabinet faces a sign of any real change. And what is the West looking for if Mubarak falls? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm David Foster. Many Egyptians are suspicious of behind-the-scenes deals between the Egyptian government and the security forces, a tie-up between the two. And by the looks of the new cabinet appointments so far, the link is as strong as ever. Zainab Walji has more.
Mubarak hasn't had a vice president in his 31 years at the top. Now Egypt has its first number two since Mubarak himself served under Anwar Sadat. And it is thought Omar Suleiman, the chief of intelligence, was picked because he is very much Mubarak's man. He's 71, likely selected for his loyalty and his ties to the country's military, much like Mubarak himself. Quiet and reserved, Suleiman has always supported Mubarak's policies at home and on the world stage. As a former military commander, Suleiman fought in both the 67 and 73 wars with Israel, also serving in Egypt's war in Yemen in 1962. But it was as a diplomat that Suleiman earned respect. President Mubarak entrusted him to be Egypt's envoy during Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. Mediating between Palestinian factions Hamas and Fatah, Suleiman helped to stop the escalating violence in the territories that ensued between the two sides in 2007. He is regarded by some in the West as a tough negotiator. One American official even described him as having a back of steel. And a 2007 US intelligence cable made public on WikiLeaks was full of praise.
He adamantly denies any personal ambitions, but his interest and dedication to national service is obvious. His loyalty to Mubarak seems rock solid. At 71, he could be attractive to the ruling apparatus and the public at large, as a reliable figure unlikely to harbor ambitions for another multi-decade presidency.
But it's Suleiman's personal bond with Mubarak that's unmatched, credited with saving his life in Ethiopia during a 1995 assassination attempt. However, relations between the two men have allegedly cooled in recent times. People close to Suleiman claim he's not an admirer of Mubarak's son Gamal. And when President Mubarak thrust Gamal into the limelight, labeling him the hope of the poor, it was at this time that Suleiman was seen by many Egyptians as the preferred alternative. However, it's these same Egyptians demonstrating in Egypt this week who see Suleiman's appointment, one that they may have once welcomed, as irrelevant. So after 30 years of resistance, why has Mubarak chosen to appoint a vice president now? And if Mubarak goes, is Suleiman someone the West could do business with, or will it have to be someone else? Zainab Walji, Inside Story.
I was bringing our guest now from London, Khalil al-Anani, a political analyst and professor at the School of Government and International Affairs at Durham University. From Doha, Ibrahim Arafat, a professor of political science at both Cairo University and Qatar University. From Washington, D.C., Mohammed el-Menshawy, the Washington bureau chief for Shuruk newspaper. And on the line from Cairo, Nabil Zaki, editor-in-chief of the weekly al-Ahli newspaper. Let me talk to you first of all. The front page of your paper goes, "In the footsteps of Tunisia, angry shouting in Egypt, Egypt's revolution, Gaia is coming, So will these new appointments, will the shake-up of the government allay the fears of any of those people that you've met on the street?
This reshuffle in the government will not help at all. It will not solve any problem, just because of one reason, which is very well known, that the government, generally speaking, is just an executive branch for the high authority, I mean the presidency. There is just one-man rule here in Egypt. He is taking all decisions, and the ministers are just secretaries in his office. So the people understood that after 30 years. Now they consider that all the mistakes, all the grievances, all the injustice which they are suffering from was because the policy which was outlined and drawn by the president. This is the main issue now in the streets of Egypt.
So why do the people that you've spoken to, why do they think he would have gone down this route? Because nobody's assuming that Mubarak is a stupid man, and he possibly would have understood that the people would have seen straight through his motives for this.
There is a problem now about this point in particular, because there are some advisors who used to tell him since a week now that do not listen to the people, because it means that you will take your decisions under the pressure. They consider that if he took decisions under the pressure, it's something ugly, not polite. This is the main mistake. They are indeed stupid. They do not understand that in politics, if a ruler listens to the demands of the people, it means that he is strong, not weak, as they imagine.
Nabil, stay there if you would. I'm going to go to London, talk to Khalil al-Anani. Would it be fair to say that it looks as though President Mubarak is simply making these changes, rearranging the furniture, if you like, to buy himself some time?
Absolutely, it's true. We are talking here about a military regime that would like to retain power forever. President Mubarak himself doesn't imagine himself outside power. And if we remember that 3 years ago or 4 years ago, he declared in the parliament that he will remain in power until the last breath in his heart and his chest. So we are dealing with a very, very close-minded person that doesn't want to leave power, regardless any kind of internal or external pressure on him. So now he's trying to buy time by appointing a new government, which is, in fact, it's not a real government. People in Egypt doesn't call for stepping down the government. It's very clear. People want Mubarak to step down and to leave power, and it's very clear message. So he insisting to keep power, to push people to surrender, and I don't think that people will give up. I think he will give up at the end of the day, but it will be on expense of many lives of people.
Can I talk to Ibrahim Arafat in Doha? It was suggested by the editor of the newspaper that we spoke to in Cairo that there might be one or two people who are advising the president, people he would listen to. What kind of advice do you think he would be getting if that is the case? Or is he a man who makes decisions without real consultation?
I think, advising is one of the most problematic issues, when it comes to situations like this. This is a predicament, and it's a crisis time. And in a crisis time management, usually the crisis time managers, would delegate most of the decision making to the person himself, to the leader himself. So given the hierarchy of the Egyptian elite, that Mr. Mubarak is a military person, and given that the people who are assisting him are basically also of a military background, so they would keep this hierarchical nature of decision making. So they would definitely give him some advices, but I think I'm not going to say they ran out of options, but their options seem to be limited.
But would anybody give him the sort of advice he might not want to hear, such as your time is up, Mr. Mubarak, you really ought to go?
It's I'm definitely sure this is going in the minds of some of them, but morally speaking, I think they will always refrain to say it or to make it their first choice. They will keep it as a second or perhaps the last choice, because it's morally devastating. They are a group of warriors, so it's a game, it's an open-ended game, and they are strategists. So I believe that they will continue, they will go on. Perhaps they believe that offering some little concessions will pacify the anxiety of the street, but at the end the street is not looking anymore for cosmetic changes, it's basically looking for surgical changes.
Mr. el-Menshawy, waiting patiently, thank you very much indeed for that, in our Washington studio. Omar Suleiman, is he the sort of person who would agree with everything that he hears from his boss? Or is he somebody as a deputy who might give Mubarak the kind of advice that he might not necessarily want to hear, but might be good for the country as a whole?
I believe history showed us he listened to his boss all the time. For the last 30 years or so, he been very loyal to the president. He saved his life personally in Addis Ababa in 1995 and saved Mubarak's life and the regime life. I have no doubt that they are not talking about Mubarak's future, they talk about their future, because it's not only about President Mubarak personally, it's about the regime, and they are, as Professor Arafat said, they are not telling him step down, they all should step down, and it's not all about Mubarak. His advisor won't tell him go away, it's for all of them to go away. So it's unlikely to have any concession unless they have to. And I believe they choose, unfortunately, to be in the wrong side of history so far. Like any bad dictator in any third world country, they choose to be against the will of the people. And they are buying time. And time is not in the good side of Egyptian people in Egyptian street. Innocent victims are falling every day, every hour. Mubarak is in office, unfortunately.
If he has surrounded himself with this new cabinet, which is made up of, if you like, yes men, would it be fair to say then that the military holds the key to where this all goes?
Yes, the military does, and I hope he will understand the message sent from Washington yesterday, from President Obama and Hillary Clinton. For first time, they sent mixed signal. I interpreted it that we'll support you, we'll support the next leader coming from the army to maintain stability in Egypt. And this was first time, I believe this dramatic change in Washington happened last night here. And I believe they are communicating with the army behind closed door, telling them, we will be ally with you, we'll support you, but you have to find solution. And I believe Washington, growingly now, they understand that there is no solution in Mubarak presence. They
I'm going to
it's a matter of days.
Ask you and the other guests in a moment whether the United States and, let's say, the European Union are fence-sitting. But that's after we remind ourselves of specifically what Hillary Clinton had to say. She urged Mubarak's government to take heed of the Egyptian people's grievances, these were her words, and begin to take concrete steps to implement democratic and economic reforms. Weighing into, the British Prime Minister, David Cameron, appeared to be in agreement but stopped short of saying that Mubarak should step down. The difficulty here is that the West has regarded Mr. Mubarak, if you like, as some kind of stability in a desperately unstable region, its friend, and it might be very worried about what would happen were he not to be there anymore.
Yes, but next regime in Egypt will be friend for the West because it's the national interest of Egyptian state. Egypt government, the next government will continue having peace with Israel, not because U.S. interest, but because Egyptian interest. I believe the Egyptian elite in opposition and in the government as well, there is common agreement on basic U.S. Egyptian national interest. And being close to the United States, it's not an option. They will follow that. El-Baradei will do it, Omar Suleiman will do it, any other president will do it. I believe Washington should get close to the demand of the streets and ask Mubarak directly and boldly to leave for sake of Egyptian people and Egyptian state.
Thanks very much indeed. We're going to go back to Cairo to another journalist, Nabil Zaki, who we had at the very beginning of the programme. You were listening there to somebody, I guess you know, Mohammed el-Menshawy, a correspondent in DC, saying, yes, the key here is the military. So my question to you is the military one entity, or are there different factions within it that may go different ways?
I believe that, first of all, the military forces will not use force against the people in the streets. I cannot imagine that this will happen, and the demonstrators themselves have confidence that the military will not use force against them. The problem in Egypt now, as some of our colleagues mentioned now, that the regime is suffering from a sort of paralyzed, you know.
Sorry to interrupt, but I would really like you to address this point. I mean, is it possible that some part of the military could back President Mubarak, but others within the military could say, no, we're going with the people, and that could be the way that brings down the Mubarak regime?
I believe that this way, in general, this is the attitude of the army, yes, the military, that we will not stand against the will of the people. That's right, I agree with you. And there are many solutions, even some solutions which you can call moderate. What kind of moderate solutions now? For example, let us imagine that Mubarak made a speech now saying that you people, I pledge to you that I will not be a candidate again this year. And forget anything you heard before about Gamal Mubarak. This will make the people relax. But unfortunately, he is not taking any step in this direction.
Khalil al-Anani, I saw you nodding as we were hearing from Cairo. What's your thought on this?
Well, 2 points. The first one regarding the army, I would say that we should differentiate between two levels of the army, the high command of the army and the second and the third line of leaders in the army. I would say that the high command of the army absolutely loyal to Mubarak regime. And as Menshawy said that they don't dare to ask Mubarak to leave because if Mubarak will leave, they will leave with him. The second issue is that if the second line or the third line of the army really respond to the will of people, I think we might witness some kind of faction and dispute inside the army, and this will be the end of Mubarak regime. The second point here about the moderate solution that Mr. Nabil Zaki is talking about, I don't think that people will accept Mubarak to remain in power for more than 24 or 48 hours. People know that Mubarak took power for 30 years. He did nothing for the sake of people, for the sake of Egypt. So they realize that if Mubarak will take another chance, he will remain in power and people will have to sacrifice themselves again. So I think there is a huge mistrust between Mubarak and Egyptian people, and people are not stupid to give him another chance. It's over now. This is what the street is saying in Egypt.
Okay, well, let's take it a stage further. And as I mentioned at the top of the programme, if Mubarak goes, what kind of administration would the West most like to be in place there? And Ibrahim Arafat, if I can quote to you from today's Israeli newspaper, Haaretz, which seemed to be saying, back off to Obama and Clinton and David Cameron and others, back off, we want Mubarak to stay there. This was what was written. The Americans and Europeans are being pulled along and aren't even considering their genuine interests. Well, I take it by that they mean Israel's interests in the Middle East and the wider Middle East peace process. So what will be the thoughts of the US administration and the European Union on this?
I think so far the European Union and the United States, are trying to hold the stick from the middle. They support the right of the Egyptian people to build democracy, but at the same time they insist on having a gradual transition. And they always state that, we support the people, but we also urge the government to take certain steps, which means that they so far keep recognizing the government. But let me put this within a broader framework. I believe any coming government in Egypt, whether it is a dictatorial government, if so to speak, or a democratic government as the street wishes, I think there are some objective constraints on the foreign behavior of the coming government in Egypt. To tell you the truth, in my judgment, it is better for Israel, it is better for the United States, it's better for the European Union to have a truly democratically elected government in Egypt. You know why? Because democratically elected governments do not go to war.
But this is what the United States urged on the Palestinian people. Democratic government, free and fair elections. And the United States saw Hamas elected.
No. There is a huge difference between the Palestinian scene and the Egyptian scene. For the advantage of Egypt and the entire region, this popular revolution is not led by the Muslim brothers. It's not led by any ideological current. It is the people's revolution.
I understand that, but my thoughts were that the United States might be wary, having asked for democracy in the Middle East once before, and got something that it didn't want.
We cannot say, we cannot point out one specific scenario. Politics, Mr. Foster, is a dynamic process. You cannot rule out or rule in any possibility. But what I see, the objective facts we have on ground are telling us quite well, Egypt is not going to engage itself in serious troubles overseas or outside of its borders. You know, if the new government, if a new democratically elected government runs a questionnaire and asks the Egyptian people, would you like to fight again, specifically against Israel, I would say 90% of the people would say definitely not.
So why would Israel, let me come to Mohammed el-Menshawy, why would Israel want to see Mubarak stay in power and not have a democratically elected government that, according to Mr. Arafat, wouldn't want to interfere in situations beyond its border?
Because I believe in the core of Israeli psyche, Egypt is still a threat, and democratic Egypt means one word: stronger Egypt, powerful Egypt, and that's what Israeli wish not for Egypt. I believe for US, Egypt is cornerstone for the Middle East policy for them. But for Israel, it's everything. It's the most reliable ally in the Arab world, unfortunately. And they take care of Hamas. They deal very boldly against Iran and against Hezbollah. Mubarak regime is very strong friend to Israel, and they are afraid democratic regime in Egypt will make the country stronger, more representative, more popular, and they will have to stay away a little bit from the strong relation with Israel. We have strong intelligence relation with Israel, and this is not acceptable by a lot of people. People won't like to go for war with Israel, but they won't like to be friends with Israel, and that's what Mubarak offer Israel for free, I believe.
Nabil Zaki in Cairo, let's go back to where it has all been happening. And let me ask you about the sort of pressure that you, as the editor-in-chief of an opposition newspaper, have been facing during this unfolding turmoil, crisis, call it whatever you wish. Are you being intimidated by security forces, by the government, by anybody there?
No. Till now, the people in the streets are strong, have self-confidence, and they are insisting to continue to demonstrate. And the biggest demonstration will be tomorrow. 1 million or more than 1 million will demonstrate tomorrow. That's why the government decided to stop all the train communications, and all the trains will stop tomorrow so as to try to make people get away from Cairo, but in spite of that, they will come. Anyway, I believe that the regime came to an end now, in spite of everything.
But let me put this point to you. If Mr. Mubarak is determined to cling to power, and if he sees no end to the uprising, he might possibly see only one way of ending it, and that is to turn it very nasty by sending in the troops. Is there any kind of fear that that might happen?
Concerning Israel, of course, if Mubarak will leave, this will be a real loss to Israel, because Mubarak is an ally to the United States of America. He was at the same time, you can consider him, he was at the same time an indirect ally to Israel. He followed a policy which was...
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but as we're coming towards the end of the program, the point I wanted to have addressed is whether the people on the streets will stay there no matter what. If Mubarak realizes that the only way he can quell this uprising is by the use of force, are the people prepared for that?
The people will stay in the streets till they hear that Mubarak left his office. That's sure, I'm sure of that. And maybe my colleague misunderstood me when I said, when I spoke about a schedule of not to be a candidate and so on. So I mean that, I didn't mean that the people will accept that, but maybe he could make some calm, but for just a while, but the people will not be convinced, and the people want now a radical change in Egypt. That's the point.
Well, thank you very much to my guests in London, Khalil al-Anani. In Doha, Ibrahim Arafat, and Washington, D.C., Mohammed el-Menshawy. Also on the line from Cairo, Nabil Zaki from the opposition newspaper. Thank you, too, for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. Drop us a line if you've got any thoughts, anything you'd like us to cover. Inside Story at aljazeera.net. Inside Story at aljazeera.net. Until next time, goodbye.